You don't want to run Strand because it looks overcomplicated? Bullshit, Guardian. Listen, Strand looks complicated as hell when you first see it. But once somebody explains what everything does and how it works together, it becomes one of the easiest subclasses in Destiny 2. And low-key, one of the strongest. So today I'm breaking down Suspend, Unravel, Sever, Woven Mail, Threatlings, and Tingles. What they do, how to activate them, and how to chain them together so you can actually enjoy Strand instead of just being overwhelmed by it. This is Strand for Dummies, but not watered down though. Okay, what Strand is basically a reality thread. You're pretty much pulling on the fabric of the universe to control the entire fight. Strand lets you suspend enemies in the air, spread Unravel throughout an entire group, sever enemies so that way their damage output is a lot weaker, woven mail armor, spawning threatlings that chase your enemies, make tingles, which are balls of Strand energy you can throw. Now, I hope you're starting to see the pattern here. Everything that Strand does comes back to these keywords. You learn the verbs, and the subclass becomes stupid simple. Okay, what is Suspend? The target is immobilized by a web of Strand matter, lifting them into the air. While suspended, Guardians are unable to move freely, combatants are unable to move or fire their weapon, and unstoppable champions are stunned. Suspended targets unwind into a tingle when defeated. Okay, we're going to start with the easiest way to suspend enemies, and that's going to be with a shackle grenade, a thrown weapon of weighted Strand matter that detonates on impact, suspending targets and creating additional suspending sub-projectiles. While some of you may be saying there are other ways to suspend targets than just shackle grenades, yes, that's just the easy way. There are also other ways, especially ones unique to each individual character, that we'll get into later in the video. Because next I want to talk about woven mail. Your body is encased in a protective mesh of tightly woven Strand matter, greatly reducing any incoming non-precision damage. Alright, so woven mail is essentially your green armor. When it's active, you take less damage, your melee comes back a whole lot quicker, and most importantly, while woven mail is active, your Strand weapon final blows and ability final blows have a chance to create a tingle. And if you want to increase those chances, you can add the thread of transmutation, which reads, while you have woven mail, weapon final blows create a tingle. Alright, next let's talk about unraveling rounds, which are a powerful buff for Strand weapons that apply a lingering debuff to enemies, causing them to spawn damaging unraveling seekers that chain damage and create tingles on defeated. Now, I have seen a lot of people have the question of how do you proc the buff unraveling rounds? The only way you're going to be able to do that, unfortunately, is through the thread of propagation fragment, which reads, power final melee blows grant your Strand weapons unraveling rounds. Now, once you have the buff unraveling rounds, the targets you're going to be firing at, as they take additional damage, they will create unraveling projectiles that seek out nearby targets. Unraveling rounds from your Strand weapons pierce the shields of anti-barrier champions and stun them. Unraveled targets unwind into a tingle when defeated. Now listen to me closely. That is the only way to proc unraveling rounds for your Strand weapons, but it's not the only way to unravel a target. Another way to unravel a target is through the Arcane Needle melee ability, which unravels targets instantly. Then you have the exotic sidearm, Final Warning, which marks enemies, and when the weapon is fully charged, it applies Unravel across a group of enemies. And lastly, Threatlings, that land on enemies that can apply Unraveling too. And now let's jump straight into Threatlings, which is a creature woven from pure Strand matter that seeks nearby targets and attacks, dealing damage. Also, if you pair this with the aspect Thread of Evolution, Threatlings travel further and deal additional damage. Then, right before Renegades launch, Bungie put out an article that stated, Threatlings that lose their target before impact will land and look for another combatant instead of exploding. Note, this will reduce the cases where your big gang of Threatlings all explode on a single drag. The result is they feel smarter and more alive. And as we move into severing targets, what you have to understand is, to sever an enemy is basically your safety net in high level content, because when you sever an enemy, they put out less damage. Here's 4 ways to sever enemies. First, you can use the threaded spike, which is a strand melee from the hunter. So pretty much you throw a rope dart that bounces between enemies, severing them all. You can also catch the dart on return, which will give you some melee energy. Second, you have the Titan's Frenzy Blade, which is also a strand melee that has up to 3 charges. Each dash slices and severs enemies on hit. Then you have the Fragment Thread of Isolation. Land rapid precision hits, the enemy sends out a severed burst. And lastly, you have the Slice perk, which you can find on weapons which it'll randomly roll. Using your class ability, your weapons now apply Sever. Plus, when enemies that are severed die, they produce a tingle. So, with all of that being said, Sever equals crowd safety plus tingle engine. And lastly, tingles. Tingles used to be simple, but Bungie updated the rules. So here's the real way they work now. First, you must apply a debuff. Suspend, unravel, or sever. Without a debuff, no tingle. 2, then kill the enemy while the debuff is active. If the debuff falls off, no tingle. Woven Mail bypasses all of these rules because when you have Woven Mail, any weapon kill creates a tingle. Quick side note, if you're running Prismatic, you must have a strand ability or aspect equipped. At least one strand, grenade, melee, or aspect, because your unraveling rounds will not make tingles in Prismatic if you don't have a strand ability or an aspect equipped. Please know you cannot spawn tingles back to back. They have a 12 to 15 second cooldown timer, which you can see on the left side of the screen. So what actually are tingles? Well, tingles are physical knots of strand matter you can throw, shoot, turn into whirling maelstorms, turn into threadlings, trigger suspend bursts, feed back into strand effects. Tingles are the centerpiece of every strand build. And that's the updated real strand breakdown for dummies. And something I want to mention in here before we go is that when it comes to unraveling rounds, we only have one way to be able to proc unraveling rounds. Unlike with Void, you can proc volatile rounds and destabilizing rounds not only from the subclass, but we have weapon perks that follow up as well. Even with Solar, we have so many ways to proc Radiant, ignitions, and even scorch stacks, applying more scorch stacks, and stasis. There's many ways to freeze slow targets. And when we come to Strand, we only have one way to proc the unraveling rounds. And I think that needs to be updated, just in my opinion. But hey, you know the vibes, as long as we gaming. Don't forget to head over to YouTube and subscribe to my audio-only podcast on child loss, grief, and mental health.
Give it one of these right here. Yeah. Don't be scared of it, though, baby. Be aware of it. I might pass out if I do it too much.